Hey, it's Mike here, and today, really first, this might be hard for some of you, but yeah, face reveal again. It's been a while since I've shaved. Anyway, that's my face. And today, I'm gonna be responding to "The Vegan Rabbit Hole is Insane" by Oompaville. But well, guess what? I live in that rabbit hole. That does not sound vegan, but I think it is. Well, I recognized Oompaville. I wasn't super familiar with him. He has 5.5 million subscribers. This video has 250,000 views at this point. And I will say he seems to be largely a comedian.
50% facetious, by the way. We're positing. This is what these videos are all about.
He doesn't take a super strong stance for or against veganism. He makes a lot of jokes at the expense of veganism. He makes some positive and negative health claims as well. Quite a lot of health claims.
Hospital admissions in England due to vitamin and mineral deficiencies seem to have surged in recent years.
But I will say a couple of those health claims are sort of factually inaccurate or really just not up to date. So we're gonna compare the research to those claims, clear them up. But yeah, most of the video is really about whether or not veganism itself is some type of conspiracy, which I think is for entertainment value.
Today we're talking about the vegan psyop, specifically Western vegan militant activists and freakazoids.
As well as the question, are vegan activists who are really loud and out there actually doing more harm than good? So let's go. But really quick, I just want to give a shout out to my friend Daynesh. He has a YouTube channel here, and he is an Oompaville viewer. So he was like, you gotta respond to this. So here I am. And he actually just did a video on my recent Costa Rica trip, so you can check that out.
We have a lot to cover, so if you're a vegan, I recommend just commenting now, saying how much you hate me, that you're unsubbing, etc. But we're gonna be talking about some really interesting, fun stuff. And by the way, I do not hate vegans. I just don't like them. Just kidding. Truly just a joke. I'm not one of those guys.
And frankly, he weirdly reminds me of me before I was vegan, just in the sense of how he's sort of looking at these issues and sort of laughing things off and taking a middle ground stance. But of course, that's been 15 years now for me since going vegan. So anyway, let's just get right to his health claims here.
They're definitely right about the diet, for sure. They're absolutely correct about that. And it is impossible to argue with. It really is. Maybe you throw a steak in there 2 times a week, then it'd be even better. But it beats most other diets. Like, really it does.
So yeah, he cites a quote that shows that vegans have lower levels of disease. And I will add to that, a meta-analysis like this showing that vegans have 15% lower cancer. And more specifically from the Adventist studies, we're talking about much lower levels of obesity, diabetes, etc. But it's funny because he said it's impossible to argue with, and then immediately flips and argues with himself, essentially.
Professor Camilla Hawthorne, chair of Royal College of GPs, whatever the f that royal title is, expressed concern over the alarming rise of hospital admissions due to vitamin deficiencies. She noted, with some anecdotalness, a near 10-fold increase in admissions for patients with a diagnosis of iron deficiency and a 4-fold increase in folate deficiency. Regardless, it just means you are not consuming nutritionally dense food, which is possible in any diet.
Okay, so he makes this claim about this UK woman, and I have seen this around, so I'm happy that I had a chance to respond to it. And right off the bat, a lot is wrong with this. It's like we have one little societal change over here and another societal change over here. They must be connected. But I noticed that folate was one of those nutrients listed, and he does make a claim about folate. Here he is.
But meat happens to be delicious, succulent, and quite nutritionally dense in iron and folate. So
this is just factually incorrect. Unfortunately, meat as defined by animal flesh is very low in folate, especially compared to all of these amazing plant-based sources. Whether we're talking about beans or dark leafy greens, the plants that we eat are king here. And for a simple example, to the USDA, and beef generally has between 5 and 10 micrograms per 3-ounce serving. Let's call it 7.5 micrograms. Well, looking to something simple like black beans. 1 cup has 860 micrograms, and that's even less. That's 2.2 ounces. So black beans by weight have 156 times the amount of folate that beef does. And these other meats are low as well. And this explains why people on the carnivore diet, like Michaela Peterson, now Michaela Fuller, Jordan Peterson's daughter, admits to having gotten a folate deficiency on her carnivore diet. And this makes sense because we need about 400 micrograms of folate per day. And in order to reach that, eating an all-meat diet, you're gonna have to be eating at least 10 pounds of steak.
A study in the UK found that half of the vegans sampled were deficient in vitamin B12, which is extremely important.
So yeah, he cites this study on UK vegans being low, and that's why vegans are crazy. I mean, the joke was right there.
Psychosis. It kind of makes sense, kind of weirdly makes sense. That's crazy.
But the reality is that that is a very old data set compared to all the data sets that we have now. That's decades old, and we can just see study after study after study after study showing that vegans do not have an increased level of B12 deficiency. And in fact, from a recent German study, this one, the vegans actually had a better B12 status than the meat eaters. And this is due to just widespread fortification of plant-based milks and other products, as well as just supplementing. But again, a lot of the videos about whether or not veganism is some type of conspiracy, or again, he puts it as a psyop, which I think is funny because I somewhat recently did a response to Joe Rogan, literally calling veganism a psyop. And for those that don't know, a psyop stands for psychological operations. And in the past, it's generally been military operations during war to sort of mess with people's mental state, so soldiers would give up, etc. Anyway, so he starts throwing out some theories. Again, I feel like this is largely just comedy, but here he is.
Is veganism a psyop to make people weak and lame and defenseless, all right? Since they can't take our guns, they take away our meat. I halfway believe that promoting vegan influencers and the poorly planned diets that a lot of them peddle could be some kind of deliberate attempt to weaken people.
Yeah, I do agree. A poorly planned diet under any diet umbrella is going to be bad. But just to contrast myself, I've gained 30 pounds since going vegan and a lot of strength. I can definitely do things I wasn't able to do then. So yeah, my BMI has gone from low normal when I was eating meat to now just like the middle of the normal range. Anyway, speaking of BMI, you can come along with me. Whenever I mention BMI or body mass index in studies, I inevitably have somebody running to the comments and saying that's a trash metric, we should throw it away. And on an individual basis, I largely agree with you. So we should both be happy about the Body Pod by Hume Health. No, this is a body analyzer, meaning it's not just a normal scale that you step on. It has sensors that measure a bunch of different body metrics, not just height to weight ratio, which is essentially what BMI is. No, it looks at muscle mass, fat mass, bone mass. And because this has the retractable hand sensor, it is a step above your typical smart scale and is 98% as accurate as DEXA scans, which are of course super expensive. But let's go ahead and hop in the Body Pod. Well, I guess just on the Body Pod, and especially take a look at how my muscle mass is doing. I'm really curious about that. All right, so I just hop on this guy and it will light up. I pull out the little arm sensor. You gotta make sure you have bare feet, and the results say that there is no protein left in my body because I'm vegan. You go ahead and hook this up with Hume's app, and then you can track all of your details and even get some AI-powered daily or weekly insights. And this is advanced enough to see limb differences, and my left leg was fatter with a bit less muscle, so I'm gonna be doing left leg day. And if you would like to try the Body Pod, you wanna hop right on that because my code, Mike the Vegan, will stack with the current code to get you 50% off, but it's only active for 7 days, so you could click the link below and check it out. All right. But anyway, we can contrast all of those vegan lower disease rates that he even mentioned earlier to what he says about his carnivore friend.
I know a guy who went on a carnivore diet and had a heart attack like 3 months later, and he wasn't even that old. But I don't know anyone who went on a vegan diet and did anything except for just become a fucking raging bitch.
Yeah, this is right in line with the super high LDL or bad cholesterol levels that people get on that diet, as much as they don't want to believe that they're a threat. Then we can contrast that with studies by Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Ornish, putting people on a plant-based diet and just seeing the incidence of adverse events like heart attack and stroke just fall out the floor. I mean, 60% lower than the Ornish study and essentially completely gone over 12 years in the Esselstyn study. Anyway, he continues with his theories for why people are even vegan, this whole psyop thing.
And the poorly planned diets that a lot of them peddle could be some kind of deliberate attempt to weaken people, or it's an unintended consequence of people just doing things for money, it seems like. I really don't know.
And I understand why from the outside looking in, it could seem like people are just vegan creators for money, especially because they start making vegan content because they like it, and then they realize that they're either gonna have to stop and get a job, or if they're working a 9 to 5, they're gonna have to work like really hard hours to keep doing it, or they're independently wealthy or something, but they're gonna end up working with sponsors like the one I just showed you right there. Perfect timing for that. So yeah, I promote products so I can keep on doing this. Otherwise, I could just produce much less content, shorter videos, etc., go back to other work. So I get it. You might be like, oh, he's selling stuff. That must be why he's doing this. That's why most people under capitalism do what they're doing. But it's worth mentioning the history of somebody like me who is a vegan creator. I started 10 years ago now, And I just posted a few videos and they got between 0 and 10 views. And I just gave up on people watching, but decided that I was going to keep making videos anyway. So I kept making videos, and the rest is history. Anyway, there's a big chunk of his video where he essentially goes after animal activists and their campaigns for being too aggressive and off-putting.
It's against Sage Regenerative Kitchen and Brewery in Los Angeles. Check this out.
Look at this. Vegan protesters took over a restaurant in Los
Vegan
Angeles
protesters.
after the owner announced she's adding meat and dairy products to her formerly vegan menu.
Yeah, he talks about the whole Sage situation. It was a vegan restaurant for most of its history, and then it just, decided to go regenerative beef, all that stuff. They said it was because of low business partially, but then after doing that, they just recently closed. So I think it shows that the restaurant industry is just really hard in this economy. But in terms of how people responded going in there and sort of shouting, they had their signs, they were saying, they did the wrong thing by not being vegan anymore.
The activists stormed the Sage restaurant and they threw fake blood, which just seems like, why would you even do this? What is that? This is sad though. I feel bad for this kitchen. It is truly a testament to the insanity and the inability to be rational.
There comes a point where you're just going to want everybody to shut up about everything, or you have to accept that some people are going to be loud about issues that they care about. Like, I get it. Seeing this done by a group of people that you don't agree with just comes off as annoying, but I still stand by this as a form of activism. And I think that this type of activism did play a huge role in the civil rights movement, for example. And I'm sure a lot of people who were anti-civil rights were like, oh, that's so annoying. Why are they sitting up at the front of the bus where the white people are supposed to be? Like, they were annoyed. So I get it. It's cringy. It's uncomfortable. It's not the type of thing that I do, but I'm still happy that this type of protest exists, even though it annoys people.
Something that everyone goes through for a short period of time and then grows out of. Is that bad? That I feel like that's something they're going to grow out of.
And weirdly, I think that this does hit the nail on the head. I've talked to a lot of activists and people who are like, oh, I went to all of those, gatherings and stuff like that when I first heard about how horrible the animals were treated. And then 3 or 4 years later, they became discouraged because they didn't see change and they gave up, which is a little bit different than just no longer caring about it. So it's the fact that they just strongly had to go against society over and over again in the face of no change, sort of burnt them out. And I think if it was the complete opposite, if we had a fully vegan society and there were people who really wanted to eat meat and they were activists, they probably would get burnt out too.
It is important to admit certain things that feel important are just fads. They're just fads. It's nothing more than just wanting to feel a certain way at a certain time, and that just kind of helps.
So again, I'm just gonna have to disagree here that this doesn't just feel important. It doesn't just feel important that there are 80 billion land animals a year that are killed for food, and that it's just from an environmental perspective, even a leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions and land use and water use, etc. And also that it's clearly not a fad. There's been a pretty big vein through history of people that have abstained from eating animals for ethical reasons, whether we're talking about Pythagoras or Gandhi or Leonardo da Vinci, or maybe even Jesus, according to the film Christspiracy, which, you can watch it and see the case for yourself. But they make the case that Jesus was arrested not because he was mad that people were lending money based off the language that he used, calling people essentially murderers, but he was mad because that temple was turned into essentially a slaughterhouse with hundreds and thousands of animals ritualistically slaughtered and then eaten, and we have archaeological evidence for that as well. So, but Jesus aside, imagine just going up to Gandhi and being like, your desire not to eat animals is just a fad, like, screw you. And his video is like 35 minutes long in the interest of time. He essentially jokes that PETA is a terrorist cell, and then does talk about how these people going onto animal farms is like really scary for the farmers and that they're actually harming the farmers.
Farmers report feeling threatened by vegan activists who invade their land and disrupt their operations.
That family in particular saw up to 300 of their chickens actually suffocate as a result of this farm invasion, and potential health impacts of the family feeling incredibly unsafe and intimidated on their own property.
Saying 300 birds suffocated, I just have a hard time buying it. It's probably more likely that they actually went and saw on their factory farm that 300 of the birds happen to be dead, and then they're going to blame the vegans, because every time when you watch these videos, they go in and so many animals are just dying from neglect. And those are the ones they rescue, the ones that are like on the brink of death. Talking about people like Zoe Rooster and her chicken sanctuary, etc. I get that the farmers are scared. People are coming onto their property. That can be scary. But every time that I've witnessed so far, it's people just going on to save animals, again, on the brink of death. This is considered the right to rescue, which is the goal here. And, if we're talking about dog breeding operations, etc., like that's considered more okay, to rescue a dog that is on the brink of death from neglect. product. Anyway, and he very briefly makes a comment about lab-grown meat.
I believe it is a psyop, by the way, to usher in lab-grown meat. I don't think that anyone would ever want to eat meat grown in a lab. And I think that a lot of people becoming really angry and vegan is a great way to force the average consumer to just do that, which...
And so yeah, he says lab-grown meat or cultured meat is a psyop. But this is where I once again just need to get into that actual definition of a psyop. So we have that military definition. We can skip that one to just really quote, someone or something used by the government to influence the population's position and attitudes. So a psyop really isn't just anybody trying to change anybody's mind, which is sort of what's going on here. Like there are vegans, there are people that care about animals. They're just trying to get people to eat less animals. And yes, there are corporations, which he gets into in a second, that are trying to sell plant-based products as well, maybe some celebrities. That doesn't mean that it's a government psyop, and that doesn't mean that it's uniquely different than anyone trying to change anyone else's behavior. But I would say I do think personally that cultured meat is awesome because an animal does not have to die. And the argument, and he probably would feel this way also, is that it is unnatural. And I just have to say, if you really are afraid of things that are unnatural that much, then, stop going to the grocery store and stop buying meat in plastic. Stop hunting using steel weapons, stop sitting on the toilet, stop using electronics. In fact, the device you're watching this on right now, you should just throw away. It has the potential to save so many animals. It has the potential to spread way less disease, and then eventually to also be more eco-friendly, but let's keep on going.
If you're completely detached from the process of life and death, and you've never seen an animal or held an animal, and you think non-ironically that meat comes from the grocery store, or at least you thought that until you were 25, then you have no right to consume living things, in my opinion. I'm not saying you shouldn't.
This is one that I partially agree with, but I also think that if you're familiar with it, that's still not an excuse. Like the people who are like, oh, I'm so intimate with killing of this animal, or someone I talked to once that thought it was beautiful to see this male baby calf being slaughtered ritualistically. But I did have a friend who was like, look, if I'm gonna eat these animals, I have to actually be able to kill them myself. And then he went to Mexico and went to go and slaughter a chicken, and he couldn't do it, and he's been vegetarian ever since.
The implication is that if you give crazy, insane people who are willing to make lists and maps of locations of something that is as innocuous as just making food for the masses, if you give them the location of those things and they're willing to do insane like this and this, maybe that poses a risk for biosecurity.
Innocuous literally translates to harmless when that entire food system of animal-based foods is harm to animals. Like meat, you have to kill the animal. For dairy, in case you were not aware, you have to keep impregnating that animal over and over again. You have these extra male calves. They end up as veal. But yeah, he's once again talking about those animal activists going into farms and having a biosecurity risk. These are people who thankfully have gotten very good at wearing personal protective gear. You can see it especially in recent years. But you want to talk about biosecurity risks, talk about H5N1 starting from the poultry industry, now jumping over to humans. Talk about SARS-CoV-2, coronavirus, and having its most likely origin as a wet market where animals were eaten for food. I know a lot of people just don't want to believe that. Then we also have smallpox, SARS-1, and the 1918 flu, killing 50 million people, likely came from a Kansas chicken farm. The majority of these diseases that kill us, that are infectious, are from animals. So if you want to talk about biosecurity, vegans are winning. I'm sorry. Now it gets into something which I think is important for vegan activists to think about, and that is the backfire effect, really. He doesn't title it that, but that's what it is.
But the effectiveness and actual ethical implication of the militant activist tactics, it is a huge subject of debate, and it doesn't do any good. In my opinion, it makes me dislike people because it's irrational.
And I do think that there are cases where vegan activists are just turning people off. They're not helping, but it's also impossible to really measure that and really know that, and for that individual to know that they're doing that. But I would also say that regardless of vegan activism and how annoying vegans are, people will dislike vegans anyway. If every single vegan shut up today and never did any more activism at all, people would still not like vegans because they sort of have to not like vegans, and kind of in the same way that a lot of people hate environmentalists that don't agree with them. For them to keep on doing what they're doing, they need to feel justified. The people that are saying no need to be wrong. And this is probably why vegans were only second to drug addicts. When people were asked which group do they least like, that was the result.
That's what it is. It's not a diet. It's not about actually making change. It's just about virtue, feeling virtuous in a moment and just feeling like you're better than other people because you feel bad. And then you see something and you're like, well, if I help, that'll make me feel good. And then you feel good by making other people feel bad. And then eventually you forget and you start eating meat again because it's really delicious.
So he's essentially saying that it's just virtue signaling and doesn't actually make a change. Well, two things here. First of all, just because there's some virtue signaling going on within a movement, which I believe there are some people that are probably just vegan, doing it just to feel better and feel powerful, whatever, that's still not a reason to just stop it all. I mean, if we had some women during the suffragette movement that just wanted attention, just talking about theoretically, would it be good to just delete the suffragette movement? Obviously not. Women can vote now. And it really is about making change for the majority. I'm just gonna go through a lightning round of these vegan or animal activists that really have actually made a difference. Compassion World Farming's campaign got rid of battery cages for hens in the EU. Fur Free Alliance campaign led to a ban on fur farming in several European countries. Humane Canada and Animal Justice's campaign led to the Ending the Captivity of Whales and Dolphins Act. And Humane World for Animals got California to increase farm animal space with Proposition 12. That's just some of it. Should all of those virtue signalers have just shut up? I don't think so.
Dominion. You've probably heard of that. Everyone's like, what's Dominion? What's Dominion? And it's just like a snuff film of factory farms, which is absolutely not representative of the farming. Generally speaking, it's just not.
So this is where I'm also going to have to disagree. And he really goes into how he thinks that there's all these good farms out there and that factory farming isn't good, but, sort of implying that he doesn't support that. Well, 99% of animals are factory farmed. This is absolutely representative, and I would go even further and say that Dominion itself focuses quite a bit on methods of slaughter that are considered humane. For example, the grinding up of baby chicks considered certified humane by the RSPCA. That's a line from Dominion. And one of the most liked comments under Oompaville's video is, talking about someone's uncle's farm that has idyllic conditions, all the cows or whatever are treated amazingly. Well, guess what? They're going to the same slaughterhouse and they're having those same horrible methods used on them. I mean, that's reality. And then he gets into this analogy with green paint that I'm definitely gonna have to augment a little bit.
And the condition of certain factory farms is really bad. I mean, that's objective. But being a militant and arguing against it through that is it's like saying paint is green and stuff. If it's green paint, you're just like, that paint is green and it's so green. And then you're like making people mad because you're screaming it at them and they're like, yeah, I see it's green. What am I supposed to do about it? Scream that it's green as well? Because I don't really want to do that. I just want to eat this hamburger.
What should you do about it? You could change. You could stop directly paying for it, which again, like $99 toward $100 paid for meat, dairy products, etc. go to factory farms. But for what I consider a more accurate green paint analogy, it's a little less fun, but we can imagine that someone's just there on the street pouring green paint down some animal's throat. And then you have some activist over there saying, hey, please stop pouring that paint down that animal's throat. And he's saying, functionally, activist, shut up. There's no reason for you to say that. We can all see that he's pouring green paint down this animal's throat. Like, you still say stop. And that's because that is how most changes happen in human history, by enough people just saying stop. But I gotta include his supporting points for less meat consumption. Here he is.
There has been a shift in the global food industry, all right? Meat consumption is still incredibly high and absolutely needs to be substantially low.
But then he gets into the, vegans aren't perfect either, so might as well harm animals anyway.
Guilt-free, harm-free, or whatever, but they're not. Anytime you're making anything, you're also killing shit. You have to like acknowledge that and just kind of recognize that that's just nature. You're a part of nature.
Yeah, this is a classic appeal to futility fallacy where it's not even worth trying because harm's can be done anyway. But vegans know that they do some degree of harm. They're trying to do less. The most widely accepted definition of veganism is about reducing harm as much as is possible. And while studies tracking mice during harvest show that they do run away, it is still worth mentioning that animals also eat plants. So when you're eating animals, you have that downstream effect of the animals that died during that plant consumption. So vegans contribute to less harvest deaths as well as less direct animal deaths. Like, it just seems like a better decision in my book.
So we've got subsidies for plant-based innovation, money from big ticket donors. We've got public awareness campaigns, the government's getting involved, school programs encouraging plant-based meals, institutional support for a plant-based diet.
It's absolutely wild to push like these really niche, little initiatives for plant-based foods on the school menu, which by the way is horrible and like riddled with processed meat generally, when we've just had these massive multi-million-dollar campaigns to get meat and dairy, etc., in schools as much as possible. Milk Pep, I have a whole video on that, as well as just Got Milk. It was literally a government program. And then he does joke that it could be a psyop by animal farmers to try and make vegans look crazy, which I guess is a different psyop altogether.
The psyop is coming from? Is it farmers? Are farmers? Is it like the, you know, the incumbent sort of, we have a lot of animals and we have a lot of money in this, and man, you been screaming with that bullhorn talking about eating broccoli, oh country boy, you're gonna get your ass whooped. Crazy vegan activists, because they're all crazy, and Oompaville will make a video about it.
But it definitely is the case that there's a constant campaign to make vegans look bad by farmers, by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, etc. I mean, we know we have the leaked emails of the egg industry talking about basically killing Josh Tetrick, who was the CEO of Just Egg, Hampton Creek at the time.
You can't make a vegan burger. Like, you can't have I have a small farm in rural America where we make bean burgers and we sell them in mass enough to make a profit. No. It's gigantic companies and corporations who are creating the plant-based alternatives, generally speaking, right? Like, generally speaking.
This is where I, again, have to disagree, and I made this point in my Joe Rogan response video, to where these plant-based meat alternatives, they're much smaller. That industry is fractions the size of the meat industry, which has all of the power to do all of these crazy psyops, etc. And yes, you can have small plant-based companies. I have a local company in my town that makes vegan sausages. Like, it can happen, but it's just not going to be the one that makes it into Burger King, for example, likely, just because of capitalism. In the end, he's obviously somebody that does still eat animals, so he's going to be spending a lot of time justifying why he does that, even if he's, you know, trying to maintain neutral and joking about both sides, etc. And yeah, I do believe that he did get some health claims wrong, again, about folate and current B12 deficiency risk, but I will say, in terms of the activists and stuff, there's gonna be loud, annoying people in every single justice movement group, regardless of what it is, and that's not a reason to stop. Yeah, we could maybe refine some things, but I still don't think that veganism is a psyop in terms of that, or in terms of, you know, the companies that are selling vegan products. Like, that just doesn't make something a psyop. But again, I don't think vegans should shut up starting today, because if they did, it would be a worse place for animals. That's pretty obvious based off everything that they've gotten done in terms of legislation so far. And yeah, it's not a psyop to make people weak. I've definitely gotten stronger since it, and we've had a ton of studies that have come out, and even mentioned these, showing that plant protein is equivalent for muscle protein synthesis as animal protein. But yeah, again, if you want to hop on that Hume body pod, you can click that link below and use the code MikeTheVegan for what stacks up to 50% off over the next week. All right, that's it for today. Let me know down below what you thought about all of his points, and if you have anything to add. And of course, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.